We have the CEO of Headspace live to air this morning. Thanks for joining us, Jason Trethowan.
Hey Troy, how are you, mate?
Very, very well, my man. Thanks for turning up amongst suspicious circumstances on the highway.
Yeah, I was, as I said to you, I went down to Torquay this morning, which is a beach I love to go, just to, it's a nice way to start the day and just driving back. So I was nice and chilled, getting ready for this discussion, and then, unfortunately there was a traffic accident, so hopefully all okay.
That's life, hey? When you think, I couldn't help but think that's just a micro moment that sometimes probably you're mostly dealing with is things think you're going to plan, you're going one way and dealing with changes. But hopefully everyone's all right over there. Thanks for joining us, mate. We are talking mental health, a pretty big space, but you've spent a fair whack of time in. You're the CEO at Headspace. We saw some great information there about what to find in the centres. But where did you find your time starting in the health sector?
Oh, look, probably a long time ago, really. Probably at the start in the late 90s. I grew up professionally grew up in the hospital system in Ballarat and in Geelong, where I live now, and then. Probably it was about 2007. I jumped out of that sort of big sort of institutions, if you like, into community sort of based services, and worked with doctors and various mental health services. And Headspace came along in my community in Geelong, and back in 2007 actually, and so I helped set it up way back then. And then about 4.5 years ago, I found myself into this job as CEO of Headspace in the National Youth Mental Health Foundation. So it's always been with me. I've learned a great deal about communities and a great deal about young people, and obviously a great deal about mental health through that journey.
What's some glaring things that people seem to miss and misunderstand about today's youth?
I think a lot, really. I mean, I think sometimes. Because we talk about mental health and there's so much more awareness around it, there's a perception to say that maybe this generation isn't as strong as previous generations because they're seeking support and they're talking about their feelings. But actually, in generations gone by, we were just told to suck it up, move on, you'll be right, sweep it under the carpet. There were no safe spaces really for going out and reaching help. And now today, young people, despite the stigma still being real, and why there's important conversations like this today, the young people are doing so well in regards to role modelling that behaviour of seeking support if they need to. And actually, they're an incredibly resilient bunch. I mean, they've navigated this whole pandemic, haven't they? And there's some will spontaneously just go back to where they were, but others will need a bit more time to recover.
Yeah, talking about, I love thinking about those, I call them old school, archaic minds that think that, you kids don't know what it's, you need to get off your phone and smell the fresh air. But there is a level of that chat. We played a little clip a bit before you got on about how important it is to get outside and be with nature with kids. Oh,
so true. In fact, yesterday I had a chat with young people from Ireland, Canada and Australia. And in fact, what they all agreed on so much, and one of the things that they really wanted to talk about was connection back to nature and connection to green spaces and open space as a way to sort of declutter their minds and really spend time on country. And that's language coming from Ireland as well as Canada as well as here in Australia.
Wow.
And it was pretty powerful, right? So they saw that, mental health services are so important, but they themselves can also take a little bit of control around what they can do to sort of centre themselves again, rebalance, focus on well-being, and get out and amongst nature where they can and enjoy that opportunity.
Do you think it's one of the main ones that we probably forget about is just get off your butt? I know you're tired parents or whoever's the carer, and go for a long walk. Not a 20-minute walk over to the oval, kick the football, got to race back to the office, which is very easy to do when we're everything's at home and at touching distance.
Yeah, that's right.
A long nature walk. Get out of the Yuyangs and visit the Yuyangs because you haven't since 1993 or I don't know. Especially regional Vic.
It's so true. There's so many beautiful places. You're either going out for a quick 20-minute burst just to get some exercise, or actually spend a couple of hours just walking and actually even taking time to stop, breathe, stare at the sun, just safely. And of course, just hear the birds, hear the water.
Yeah.
It's you may not be exerting yourself, sweating, building up a sweat, but gee, it's good for your mind, body, and spirit.
There's a certain age demographic that Headspace particularly deals with. At 16, is it 16 to 25 or a bit younger?
Yeah, 12 to 25.
12 to 25, my apology. Why 12?
Yeah, look, evidence was really clear that the age range of 12 to 25 represented what we would say young people, youth. And it was that age range that was where 75% of mental health issues emerged before 25. And coming down to 12 was when there's a lot more of an onset of mental health challenges, particularly if you think about the transitioning years from primary school into secondary school. It's a big moment in time, and like it is going from finishing school into work or study elsewhere. So that the 12 was picked, 20 years ago based off evidence, but it's we could argue we should go a bit lower, but we've got a fair bit of work with the existing age range of 12 to 25.
Culturally, it's another subcategory. I hate saying sub because it's so important. How do you deal with that? We've got so many cultures in this wonderful land, and I'm Indigenous, so I love talking about kind of subcultures, but also Indigenous. How do you offer support? I noticed you got a RAP plan, which is really great. I know you're up for review in this year, I think, to readjust. But how are you adjusting with bringing awareness not only to certain age groups but certain culture groups?
Yeah, look, let's go straight to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities first, as you say, because we would have had a bit over 7,000 individual young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people come through Headspace centres last year. So that's a sign of access, and it's a sign of a place where they can come and have a yarn and work through some issues that may be on their mind. But like all mainstream organisations, Troy, we've got a commitment to continuously improving the way in which we engage with community, and sometimes that's about providing a different way of engaging young people on their terms. Not always about them coming into a Headspace centre, but about us going on country, more outreach work, connecting more so with elders. A number of our Headspace centres are run by Aboriginal community-controlled organisations as well.
Brilliant.
Others are in high Indigenous populations and partner with elders. But I'd like to think we can do a lot more, and we certainly look forward to doing that. We also offer many opportunities for Indigenous young people to advise us as well. So we've got we recently, if you take a look at if you just type in "Take a Step" Headspace, there was a "Take a Step" campaign recently on around the country in Central Australia, where it was mainly filmed, and it was all about understanding the small steps that young Indigenous people can take when they're experiencing a tough time. A lot of it was about connecting back into culture, as we sort of said before. So we're really much about upstream and downstream type approaches, working with cultures. When you come to other refugee and migrant populations, it's a very diverse country, aren't we? We're very multicultural. But we reckon if we can get it right with young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, then that actually then gives us a bit of an ethos and a way of working and engaging with any culture.
I love it.
So that's a really big focus of ours for sure.
That's certainly what the messaging in my household. We're a 100% Indigenous household here. My wife's Aboriginal, my little son's Aboriginal. So we're all about not just joining up, but actually learning from and taking on board. It's so good to hear that your organisation is taking on that. I just started the appointment of our elder director for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Wellbeing and Engagement, and Dr. Leanne Brown is a young Indigenous lady, and she's based out of Broome, and she brings an education perspective as her first Aboriginal person to go to Cambridge University. An incredible person, and I'm very lucky to have someone like her who is connected pretty well amongst a lot of mobs around the country and elders, of course, in that. And it just reinforces our commitment from the top of the organisation. I want decision-making about First Nations people. When we're making strategic decisions about where to next for Headspace, I don't want to be talking about you without you. So having an Aboriginal person in our executive now is just another pillar in our commitment to improving the way in which we work with First Nations people. Do you think some of those suggestions and directions from First Nations people could apply to non-Indigenous people?
Oh, 100%.
Is that where we need to go? Instead of going, hey, you just speak to your mob and we'll speak to ours, let's just could the Indigenous ways be brought over, umbrellaed over the whole organisation?
Oh, totally. And I'm super excited about our future around that because, Headspace, it sounds, and it is a serious business in terms of, some serious mental health challenges do get presented to us in a whole range of ways. But often it's just stuff's going through my head. I just need to talk to someone. I don't really want to go to the overly clinical place. I want to go to somewhere where I just want to have a yarn and just a chat. And so really it's about presenting a youth cafe type feel, or even just a very non-clinical front door, if you like, for someone just to come and have a chat. And that's about, the top 5 things is engagement. And you've got to do it on young people's terms. If we can learn from the way in which First Nations people engage, I think it's very translatable to other ways as well, other cultures.
Well, it's happening quite often. I'm sure we're all seeing it. There's lots of people suggesting stuff, and then a First Nation will go, that's what we do. That's actually what we do normally. Sit around the fire and don't talk, or sit still for 10 minutes and think about nature, or go smell trees, or I don't know. Yeah, and we're like, that's what we've been doing for a long time.
It's funny, because us white fellas could sometimes go, guess what? Green spaces are really good for you. You should get out in nature. And you just look around the table and people just shaking their head at you. So, it's not like
you didn't come up with it, buddy.
But maybe 60,000 years ago we might have thought of that too. So, but that's about continuous learning, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you just think you're the smartest person in the room, but actually you never are. And it's always good to sort of just be grounded by the presence of others. And it's actually about who you work with to get that information and insights, and how best we can improve the way in which we do things.
Don't they say that's the dumbest thing to think, is to think that you're the smartest person in the room? It's like, whoops.
That's right.
I got some questions coming through on the chat, Jace, that I want to flick over to you. It comes from Alan Latu. Jason, what is the age group that use your service the most?
Yeah, it's pretty much in that sort of, mostly in the 12 to 17. But we are increasing in that sort of upper age range. So it's young men who are least represented. So the 18 to 25, that's our least represented. It's probably the 14, 15-year-old female that's represented. We have 1 in 4 young people who identify as LGBTIQ+A. So we're getting various, if you like, cohorts of our young age group between 12 and 25 that are more prominent than others. It's more in that sort of, if you like, in that sort of secondary school age range. But we continue to work on how we can increase opportunities for that 18 to 25 as well. Inclusivity
has been a very public word over the last, 5 years, and a lot of messaging, and it's very important to include. It's an amazing job that particular organisations seem to shine in, and it's really encouraging to hear that you're including or talking with and about the not just the common ones or the obvious ones, but trying to make more common the less common ones, which is really encouraging. I've got another question here from Amanda Glasson. What is the best way to motivate a young person to engage with Headspace when they are stuck with the stigma of mental health issues being a weakness?
Well, firstly, the fact that you've recognised someone who may need some support, they do need to. That's a big step, because there's probably just less than half of young people would prefer just to deal with stuff on their own and not even talk about it. And then when they're talking about it with you, the next barrier to get over is about help seeking. And so sometimes it may well be too much to themselves to Headspace. I would suggest get online, navigate around the headspace.org.au website. You can actually find a whole lot of things on there that resonate with you. You can talk to a mental health clinician without them knowing who you are, just anonymously, just talk it through, and then they can talk about the next steps maybe of seeking support. So whatever way that you think that you could use in terms of, but just being patient. You might be ready for the conversation to talk about going to see someone, but they may not be. So it's about just being there, and the fact is that you're asking that question and they know that you're caring for them. It means a whole lot to them right then, even if they're not taking the active steps that you would like them to take. Stay with it though.
This is hilarious because it's kind of talking about itself. I saw on social media from a reliable source. I don't know if anything's reliable anymore. She's a reliable person. She's a listener as well. So, but she posted something about how suicide hasn't actually gone up during the pandemic. I think it was a passing on a report from the ABC. Think of it what you will. Is social media and media a real problem right now with not actually representing the positivity or the opportunities that people could use and grab onto to go, we're not actually going down the gurgler and the world's not just getting smaller and my problem's getting bigger. It's not true. And someone's also jumped on the chat and saying, what impact does social media have on youth in regards to mental health?
Well, firstly, when we surveyed young people in 2020, 62% of them said the mental health and wellbeing of young Australians is getting worse. And when we said, well, okay, what's the main reason for that? The overwhelming main reason was social media. And then when you unpack, well, what do you mean by social media? It tends to be the consumption of the messages. And, there's a lot of activism online. There's a lot of unhappy people wanting to change the world, which is actually comes from a really good intent. But actually, when you start to consume a whole lot of information that's negative, it actually can bring you down. But of course, there's also the cyberbullying component that can come. It's a 24/7 opportunity for someone who really wants to hurt and create harm. And as you said before, it could be anonymous, someone who's hiding behind some fake avatar and they just want to have a go at you about certain things. So certainly we think there's a real tension between the opportunity and the positivity of social media and what it can actually promote. For instance, promoting your show, promoting our organisation, promoting opportunities where to go. Yet at the same time, the social media giants definitely have really come and admitted now that they have indeed caused harm. Yeah. And so we actually have critical relationships with the big tech giants, if you like, particularly say Facebook, Instagram, around their messaging, and particularly when it comes to body image for young women. So there's a whole range of different conversations that we have. It's a really, really good question, really good, interesting topic. There's not a lot of evidence around what actually happens in terms of how detrimental it is to your mental health and wellbeing in a population sense. You're right, suicides have not risen over the pandemic, but what I can say is that we've seen suicidal thoughts, behaviours, and increasing levels of crisis presentations to emergency departments have increased through the pandemic, but thankfully that hasn't translated to increasing deaths.
Amen. Could schools or school staff do more? Coming from a teacher, a listener.
Oh, look, I think schools go above and beyond already. I mean, teachers are teachers, right? And they are incredible institutions. There's 9,500 schools across Australia, all now dealing with young people, kids who are experiencing really difficult times. And so what we do and what we can work with, and many others do, Beyond Blue, for instance, work with schools to help with their wellbeing frameworks, to help them understand what they can do in supporting their kids, but also protecting themselves about their boundaries. A lot of new clinical positions, mental health clinicians are going into schools now. So they're actually starting to have their own mental health systems within schools. And the more I get closer to the school systems, the more I'm just in awe of what they do. And our role really is to help support them in the work that they do, as opposed to sort of jump in for them and do what they're actually doing now. It's incredibly challenging, I've got to say. For them.
I was going to, and it leads me to my next question. Has the pandemic changed the amount of young people reaching out? You've got a lot of physical contact centres all set up and no one can get to them. How's that been for you?
Yeah, there's been in Victoria, New South Wales, of course. When there's lockdown, Headspace is always open, but some of the physical, sit-down conversations can be limited. So there's a lot of telehealth conversations. Telehealth is either through video or through telephone. We've increased our digital presence, so in terms of web chat conversations, which is a kind of a thing to do. Clinicians sending emojis, and it's a fast world, mate. I tell you, it's very different. You see the young clinicians talking to young people, and it's a new language, right? And new ways of working. So yeah, we've got to be creative, and we have been for sure.
Just got to keep your little nephew translator next to you at the time. Just what is going on here?
Yeah, but it's quick. It's really quick stuff.
Sure. So good. So what's Headspace's message, I guess, to your audience in 2022, coming into a new year and the end of 2021. How can Headspace help the younger generation right now?
Yeah, look, firstly, the first thing is around messaging, and that is to just recognise and validate your feelings that, it's been a pretty tough time for so many of us, and so for so many young people that they've missed out on their rituals, they've missed out on their key sporting events, they've missed out on a lot of things. Uncertainty has weighed heavily. Lack of predictability has just been, what's happening tomorrow, let alone what's happening next year. So rebalance, take some time to reconnect with yourself about what's a routine you can get in that's going to create some healthy habits. Think about your connections that you've maybe done more so online, but as we sort of start to open up, start to think about those interpersonal connections. It's okay to feel a little bit fearful about the unknown, of particularly that social phobia of going out or the social anxiety of going out and reconnecting with family and friends. Take it step by step. And then with regards to say, don't hesitate to reach out for support. That's why our organisations are here. We're here for you. Don't hesitate. Don't think we're too busy. Don't use that as a reason not to reach out. We want to hear from you, and we want to listen to understand. We're not going to judge you. We're not going to tell you to just suck it up and move on. You'll be right, like that used to happen years and years ago. Right now, we just want to listen to you and find out what your journey is. Sometimes it's just about resetting your goals. Maybe you're a bit unsure about work and study. Maybe family dynamics just aren't the same right now. But there's hope, there's optimism, and there's good reason to sort of navigate some of those difficult times if you're experiencing that.
I think the encouraging thing, if it is encouraging, is that we actually can say you're not alone, because this has been such a widespread change. It's not just happened in regional Geelong and Mildura. It's, we are all experiencing separation, changing of landscape. Our work's changed, relationships have changed. So it's really important I think that's beautiful to hear. Try and validate them. How do you validate your feelings?
I think sometimes, particularly for young blokes, they don't necessarily know how to do that, or can they pick up on their warning signs? Are they aware? Some of it is through learning, right? So it's about knowledge you accumulate maybe through school, or maybe through you're looking online about these things. But actually, probably I look at it from a point of view of, if you know yourself, if you're not quite right, if you're not feeling the way perhaps you were last year or what have you, the way to do it next is to talk to someone. It may not be mum or dad, or it may not be an immediate family member, but there is someone out there. And I've got to say that, I don't know about you, Troy, but when someone reaches out to me and say, "Hey, I'm struggling a bit," you just want to help them, right? You want to put your arms around them, and you just say, "Look, let's talk it through." And that's what you will get if you reach out to someone, and the weight off the shoulders is so real. And if you need to seek professional supports, like through Headspace, like through your local GP, that's the next step. That's another step, but it's around validating your feelings. Is as much about recognising I've changed a bit. I'll talk to someone that's close to me, because they'll probably realise some of the things too, or they're surprised they didn't see it.
I go down the fishing pier quite often. I'm down in St Leonard's, and I laugh at what I'm up to these days, because I used to live in central Melbourne and used to go to the pub and go to social basketball, and now I go to the pier and hang out with these 60-year-old old Mediterranean blokes that just sit there and fish and talk about the best fish they get, and it's not much else except looking out in the ocean, and I feel so much better. It's a great break, and I just like sitting there and chatting, but they always seem to ask about what I've talked about, which I find really nice. And I think that's a good tip when someone's talking to you. Don't steal the question and go, "Oh, that's like my." I mean, it's nice, but it's also good, I think, to maybe just throw another question back, and that can help getting your feelings validated, knowing that you're being heard.
It's so true. It's so true. You sometimes, when someone answers, you want to give them space and time, and actually a bit of silence. It's uncomfortable. But guess what? It's they're about to say something else, and then if you jump in and start talking about your own relationship to that topic, it might have held them back a little bit. But it's
very much,
But that silence can be awkward, but it actually gives permission and time for someone to actually say what they're feeling when you're talking with them, for sure.
I love it. Jace, thanks so much for coming on air today and talking about something kind of a little bit heavy in the morning, but it's really encouraging to hear the wonderful work that Headspace and a wonderful person like yourself being behind the helm. I'm sure there's a great team, but it's brilliant to be able to share some space with you this morning.
There's a lot more smarter people. In fact, they're all smarter than me, mate. So that's the secret.
That's right. We're the dumbest at the table.
Yeah, absolutely, and they'll agree. No doubt about that. But
they'll validate your feelings. They will validate your dumbness.
Yeah, they're good for my self-esteem and confidence. But thankfully I've got supports around me. But no, in all seriousness, it's a heavy topic, but it's also we've got to have an optimistic outlook. We have to accept that there is a reality right now, and things were tough prior to pandemics, but there is hope. But please reach out for support if you need to. Headspace.org.au. And of course, wonderful organisations like Beyond Blue and others like Lifeline are there. But of course, your family and your friends, work colleagues, people are around and they want to listen to you if you've got something to say.
Thanks, Jason. I'll put up the link as well to Headspace as well. I love it, mate. I hope you have a brilliant day ahead. Thanks for joining us.
Take care, mate. Thanks heaps.
You're the best.
Awesome. See ya.